NiGHTS here, and I hope you enjoy my ROR review of Nights into Dreams. I originally put a poll on the internet to see what kind of game you want me to do on Christmas, whether if I should do a traditional live stream of Christmas Nights into Dreams, or go further than that in the game itself and the Christmas edition. So anyway, grab your eggnogs and cookies, because this is going to get longer.
Anyway, before we get on to this review, I wanted to talk about my experience with Knights and how I learned more to the character than what meets the eye. My first exposure to the character Knights was in, of course, Sonic Adventure with all those cameos, mainly in Casinopolis with the Knights pinball. Then after that, I keep on seeing the characters in these several Sonic games, most notably Sonic Riders after you unlock Knights, Ooh La La and Ah from Super Monkey Ball, and of course Space Channel 5 respectively. As a Sega fan, I wanted to learn more about these characters because the only other Sega game I played during my youth besides Sonic the Hedgehog was pretty much Vector Man and Crazy Taxi. So one time, I went to my GameStop and I saw Journey of Dreams for $5, played it, and there was a certain mission I couldn't get into it, and I put it down. And let's just say at the time, I thought it was an okay game. I didn't know what kind of genre Knights was playing. I thought it would be like the Sega Saturn game. I was also confused about Knights' gender because at the time I thought Knights was a girl, but realized in doing research, Knights was androgynous. Later on, when I picked up the remake, I learned more about the game and I really enjoyed it. It's pretty much one of my favorite games of all time, of course. And I picked up Journey of Dreams again. It wasn't as bad as I remember it, but I'll probably save that for another time. Well, anyway, let's get on to development history. During the development of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Atashi Iizuka suggested to Yuji Naka to make a 2D hybrid platforming game mixed with some flying elements, similar to the Sega game Arrow Flash, which was developed by Renovation for the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive. There, the character Xana Key will change her ship into a flying robot and ends up dashing around through several hazards and different enemies throughout the game. Atashi Iizuka was so impressed that he wanted to make a game based off that structure mixed with a 2D platforming elements. However, though, Sonic Team was way too busy on making Sonic the Hedgehog games throughout the rest of the Sonic franchise and finishing up the Phantasy Star game. It wasn't until 1994 and 95 is when Sonic Team just finished up the Sonic series with Sonic 3 and Knuckles, well, the classic series at least, and Phantasy Star 4 is when they wanted to divide their development studio and make other games. Atashi Iizuka went back to the flying platforming game project he wanted to do, but with a few changes. He wanted to make the game instead to be about a dream world which connects the player with the combination between simple storytelling and cinematic gameplay. How Yu-Gi-Oh! Fusagi did to the Panzer Dragoon series. So he created an androgynous character similar to Peter Pan, but having a simpler art style to Sailor Moon and other magical girl shows to appeal to a younger preteen audience and feminists all alike. He made the game instead into a on-the-rails flying arcade game where you play as a flying angel court jester connected to the play. But however, to understand people's traumas and dreams, Azuka became a therapist in the late years of 94 throughout 95. When it was time to make the game, Yuji Naka suggested to Azuka to add some real-time movement when flying around with the jester-like character by adding some ballet moves from the performers of Circus Dole. However, just like most early Sega Saturn titles, the team had a limited dev kit to work with until early 96. With Hitachi Azuka finishing the game's art style, the game was released to store shelves in July of 96. 10 days after Super Mario 64 was released to store shelves for the Nintendo 64, and late August to us Westerners and Europeans alike. To make the game control easily in real time when doing acrobatic tricks and flying through the many obstacles in the game 3D, Sega called Steven Spielberg to test the game after he was helping out on Team Andromeda on the first two Panzer Dragoon games. He was the first person to test out the 3D controller, dubbed as the Spielberg controller. And I can't say it's the first game console to have an analog. It's the first game console to have a much more simpler design, and the design we know today as of the Sega Dreamcast controller and of course the Xbox 360 controller. Not only that, it was the first console to have a switch input for D-pad support, and also it was the first controller console to have triggers in the back. This 3D controller will help players in the game to guide the dreamlike angel court jester to fly around in the game, to not only make it easier to go through the different obstacles the developers draw at, but to make easier turns in the game as well, flying in a 3D space. After that, NiGHTS gained pretty much a cult following with Sega fans and gamers alike. Not just only cameoing in several other Sega games and titles and other titles that Sonic Team made, but inspiring TV show creators and writers like Greg Weisman, who wrote the episode E is for Enemy from the show which was heavily inspired by NiGHTS' dream. NiGHTS would later become the flagship character for the Sega Saturn besides the Virtual Fighter cast. NiGHTS became more of a representative for the Sega Saturn than the cast of Panzer Dragoon and Sega Sashio himself. Sonic Team and Sega now is not respecting their IP like it was back in the 90s and early 2000s, maybe for the exception with Sonic alone. Yeah, sure, Sega and Sonic Team do work on other franchises like, let's say, the Phantasy Star series, and they create new IPs each and every day to satisfy an audience for genres to bust on. However, Sega as a whole has been not making any quality games since 2006, with a couple of exceptions. But as of recently, other creators and developers are buying their IPs due to Kickstarter campaigns and other means on buying the IPs back to their rightful owner. NiGHTS will also get a PS2 remake to celebrate the 10th anniversary and the release of Journey of Dreams. Even though the remake had positive reception to games and critics alike, there are a lot of original fans who are fan of the original games say that the PS2 remakes and the recently released Xbox 360, PS3, and PC re-release of the PS2 remake say that there's a lot of features that were missing from the original game, while other fans could just roll with it and say that it's still an amazing game to play, remake or otherwise. There are other NiGHTS fans whose who oppose the remake than just saying being an undercooked bake of the original. Okay, I am not here to discuss on how bad critics and how bad the critics like the original game more and how fans of the original game respect it more. I'm not here to talk about Sonic Team's utter success. I'm here to do a review, a remake or rebreak on Nights into Dreams. I'm here to see if the newer gamer is willing to play the remake, or should they shell out their money for a Sega Saturn. This is Nights into Dreams remake or rebreak. The development history out of the way, let's move on to the plot. For an early Sega Saturn game, there's really not that much to go away from the story. When you boot up the game, the closest thing that we have are the CGI cutscenes, but it could be confusing to the player when they first get into the game. The PS2 version is nothing else special. However, though, you can go into the options and go to the how to play menu, and basically you can read the little plot synopsis that's in the tutorial menu. Well, folks, looks like we have to read the Archie Comics, which came out in February of 1998. The story is that a long time ago in medieval Earth, a Dream King tyrant named Wiseman the Wicked creates the world of NiGHTopia, which is fractured into two dimensions. The Dream Dimension, where all dreamers want to have fun and peace in their dreams, and the Night Dimension, where the Nightmares live and wants to call havoc to other dreamer. At least the world of NiGHTopia is way better than Attilan from the Inhumans, and of course Yellow Coast Valley from Panzer Dragoon. The people and citizens like to cause drama and discrimination towards one another. Wiseman commands his Nightmare creatures, especially his high-ranking Nightmare Knights and Reala, to collect all the dream energy in the world of NiGHTopia so he can eventually lead the dream worlds to ours to take over it. One day, though, Claris's ancestor tells Knights that what he is doing is wrong, and there is another way to harness dream energy without hurting no one in the dream world. So Knights rebels against his creator, Wiseman the Wicked, and decides to take two of the most rare dream energy, which is basically the Idia of Courage. And there's also other Idia too, basically the Idia of Hope, Light, and these are basically the MacGuffins of the Night series. Knights decides to hide these two Idias in the Dream Dimension, but one of the spears broke, and now the only one remains is the shards on Knights' chest, and Knights need this dream energy to survive. Meanwhile, we cut into modern times where two kids are not having an awful day and suffering from a lot of trauma. Claris Sinclair one day wants to perform in the Twin Seeds 100th anniversary parade. However, though, when auditions come to be, she becomes quite nervous in front of the directors, and of course, she envisions the audience as these bizarre monster creatures, and she ends up running into the world of NiGHTopia, which is basically the dream dimension. As for Elliot is trying to compete in a basketball game with his peers and rivals, but however, he gets nervous that he may lose the game and humiliate and suffer from self-humiliation. He also too ends up running into the dream world after all his peers and his rivals becomes monsters. Overall, I gotta say, this plot is pretty good. Compared to most games that take place in a dream world, the developers, especially during the NES days, had a hard time setting up this dream world and making its own lore to expand upon the mythos of dreams. And even if they do, usually they don't go to the source material. It's bizarre and perhaps too surreal. And not only that, the endings can be a bit of a slap in the face. And seeing how Nights into Dreams just right away tells you about the world of Nightopia, you already could know that near the end of the game is going to be all a dream. However, though, later on in the game, it does become dark as when you progress later, as you progress in the story. For the character Knights, I do like Knights' character design, of course. The shade of purple is a nice balance between purple and neon blue. Basically represents the nighttime weather. Not only that, you can see a lot of Sailor Moon inspiration for this character. But unlike Tsusagu from Sailor Moon, where she's just a whiny brat, Knights is optimistic, and basically the character is basically a hyperactive child and who's willing to have fun to dreamers and throw any responsibility out the window. However, just like Sly Cooper from the Sly Cooper games, Knights is willing to call out Wiseman the Wicked and his mislead actions, and that if he's willing to destroy the real world, then how the humans are going to dream and feed off energy in Nightopia in the first place. Not only that, Knights' other character inspiration before and after comes from various characters in the other media, from comic books and other video games and TV. Most noticeably Mirage, aka Danny Moonstar from the X-Men comics, and Nina Null, aka Dream Girl from Legion of Superheroes. Both characters having the ability to create illusions, especially when people are dreaming at night.
Nobody ever wants a freak around who brings their worst nightmares to life.
I wonder why these two never met before. And the one interesting thing about Knights, compared to most video game characters that Tashizuka confirmed himself, is that Knights is basically the realest video game character that you can interact with in your dreams, believe it or not. Hell, one day you can have a dream and you can get fucking high with Knights. And who knows what kind of shenanigans you and Knights will have to piss off Wiseman at the end of the week. At least Knights has more connections to the player than Link or any other silent video game protagonist will ever had due to its personality. Well, as for the villains can be a pretty bit iffy in my opinion. Wiseman is pretty much like the Tyrant King trope. I will say, compared to most villains, he did create the world in his own vision, so he doesn't have to worry about destroying an existing world. However, though, he does want to anyway, because let's face it, the dream world can be boring, and feeding off energy, especially dream energy, ain't as long lasting than, let's say, when you're awake. As for Reala is just basically the second in command and basically the apprentice of Wiseman. His job is basically to capture Knights so he could please his master, so he won't be executed off the dream world. Because believe it or not, Wiseman the Wicked can kill off his own nightmaring creatures, well, besides Knights. My only gripe about this character, especially in the games, we don't really get to see any importance with him. Yeah, sure, in Journey of Dreams, he do fleshed out his personality, and he does come up close to Knights and ends up trying to strangle him. That's the closest thing that we get. I only see this character being redeemed in the Archie Comics, because at least in the Archie Comics, he tries to attempt to go into the awake world once Wiseman the Wicked is basically dead. But either than that, this character doesn't really have that much of importance in the game. To me, or is that the fact that Reala kind of looks like Harley Quinn from Batman anime series? I don't know, it's probably the red and black jester hat. As for our two dreamers, Elliot Clarice, they're basically the avatar characters. We're supposed to put their foot in our shoes on how dreams are like, and how nightmares are basically scary to us when dreaming, and how we can get narcolepsy when dreaming. I think the only character that has more importance in the story is Clarice. I don't mind Elliot Edwards, but even then, he's just being humiliated on losing a basketball game. I say the characters in the sequels were much better, Will and Helen, is because not only they're suffering self-humiliation and a lot of trauma, not only that, they're being disconnected to their parents, which is more personal to the player than, let's say, self-humiliation. I will say rumor has it that Clarice could be Ulala as a kid, and Elliot Edwards is basically Jaguar. I don't see any similarity except for the characters protected each other when things go wrong. That's all I gotta say. With the plot being out of the way, let's go on to dumb aesthetics. For an early Sega Saturn game, it still looks impressive 22 years later, even in 2018. To the floor textures and details in the trees from Mystic Forest and Spring Valley, to the statues and ruins in soft museums, it's still great to look at even up to this day. Also, I like the game's art style. It has that 90s anime flair, which you see to akin it to like Sailor Moon. NiGHTS is the only 3D Sega Saturn game to keep a consistent frame rate to 60 FPS compared to most Sega Saturn games in its libraries, especially from third parties. Seeing how the Saturn's pretty much hard to program in 3D due to its 8x processor, Sonic Team really did a great job on capturing the game's appeal and aesthetics to represent the dream world while you're asleep at night. And even though one or two stages look the same, they all have their own gimmicks in each and every way. Like, for example, Soft Museum, everything is soft and everything is like a fluffy pillow and trampoline. And also, NiGHTS looks kind of weird when the character is... okay, let's not get Devinar into the mix. But I do like how the game keeps at a 60 FPS at all times, pretty much like another Sega Saturn game which came out before this one, Panzer Dragoon 2, which makes flying around the worlds at a fast-paced rate not to be so irritating and annoying without no interruptions, and still functions well when playing the game. Even though the Sega Saturn could do the best in 2D, NiGHTS is one of those games that could show the console that you could do 3D. The only thing I don't like about this game when it comes to its frame rate, that it could chug in most places, mainly in scripted areas where it's all in 3D, especially in stages like Stick Canyon and Mystic Forest, where they also had a 3D overhead perspective and a rear view overhead perspective. And yes, throughout the game does switch different perspectives when flying around this dream landscape. That's the only thing I gotta complain about the frame rate when it comes to this game. And the other thing I didn't like about this game, even though the 3D polygons had a lot of details, especially from the floor and ground texture and ceiling texture, the skyboxes are pretty much the laziest things I've seen in a Sega Saturn game. It felt that the developers didn't really have that much time to develop their own skyboxes, so they had to go on, I guess, Google in the mid-90s when internet was rare and new, and they just had to put these JPEG images over these 3D backdrops and 3D polygons and renders. Hell, the skyboxes in Spyro, or heck, Panzer Dragoon Saga looked better, and Panzer Dragoon Saga was pretty much a late Sega Saturn game. I will say though, the graphics are better than Crash 1, but not as good as the first Panzer Dragoon games or hell, even Mario 64 for that matter. But for the time in '96, the graphics were breathtaking to watch. Also, I like the character designs of the bosses. It kind of looks like they ripped out monsters from the Nega world from Sailor Moon. One example being Puffy, and I could tell, the design is based off the Concerto Screaming Violin monster based off a Sailor Moon episode. They will also use Puffy's design again for the character Queen Theodora from Skies of Arcadia. The only character model that's off is Reala and maybe Jackal, but as for the bosses, even for their low polygon textures, they're supposed to represent your greatest nightmares and fears, seeing how they're Nightmarians. Now you may be wondering, what about the PS2 version? Well, before we begin about the PS2 version, if you don't like the graphics in the PS2 version, there's also an option you can play the original Sega Saturn graphics. However though, when playing the game, you get this thick purple borderline, which can be distracted to some players. Unless you're playing a PC version, you can use a mod. Not only that, they took out, which I forgot to mention, the transparency when the bosses explode on impact, sadly, and some of the transparency when Knights is paralooping, of course. But the 3D polygons are still there, so if you're not a big fan on the way that the PS2 version looks, you can always play the Sega Saturn version, which is a nice attempt effort, seeing how most Sega Saturn games are pretty much hard to port. But the new graphics inside, the new graphics are even better than the ones on the Sega Saturn. Not only they still had the breathtaking visuals, there's also more detail in the stages themselves, like the giant windmills from Spring Valley and Frosty Mountain Peaks, to the snow-covered pine trees in Frozen Bell. And also, when playing Soft Museum, I haven't noticed that funny-looking orange tree that was texture on when this game was getting remade. This proves that throughout the 10 years after Knights was made, the developers knew to change some things in the graphics, but still make it feel like the same like the original. My only gripe about the PS2 graphics is that in the original Sega Saturn game, when you're flying against ceilings and or the ground, the game has this pop-up effect, which can be pretty jarring, to say the least, especially with the JPEG skyboxes. But I can forgive it for the time. But the PS2 version, sadly though, they added more dithering, seeing how this game kind of looks like it was stuck in 480p than 720p, seeing how they ported just the PS2 version on the modern consoles. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, of course, but dithering is just there to hide all the pixels to make the game a little bit smurry. Even though the character models are well executed and well refined, how they use the modern design from Journey of Dreams. However, when flying around the world, especially at a fast pace, you can really notice the floor textures and ceiling textures fade in and out when flying. And I will say this remake isn't as good as, let's say, quote-unquote Sly 3, which came out 2 years prior before this remake. But I will say the visuals are way better than the ones on the Sega Saturn. Plus the bosses, well, the bosses' character models are hit and miss. I don't mind Puffy, Gopo, and Claus. They look the same as they were in the Sega Saturn version. And Reala and Jackal have much of an improvement due to their facial features. Reala has more of the modern design, despite the mask and somewhat muscular arms. The only character design I don't like is Gilwing. I know he's a dragon and stuff, but he has too much of a bigger chin than the size of Peter Griffin. But the visuals in the PS2 remake are better, and if you don't like the visuals, you can always switch it back to Saturn mode. The only thing it doesn't have is the transparency. If you thought the visuals looked beautiful in Nights, then just listen to the music. The composer, Nafumi Nata, Sonic CD fame, wanted to add more of a cinematic flair, similar to Yoshizaki Uzuma soundtrack to Panzer Dragoon. And just like Yoshizaki's soundtrack from Panzer Dragoon, the soundtrack is very captivating, especially with the variety of instruments, with the violins, flutes, bentar, acoustic guitar, and heck, even the freaking bagpipes is played in this game.
Scott! Yes?
This game has more of a waltz orchestral feel. Not saying there are some pop songs in the game, such Message of Nightopia every time you beat a level, and Frozen Bell, and heck, there is some gospel in there too, from stages like Stick Canyon. Basically what I'm trying to say that this is the most sophisticated soundtrack that will make every gamer think rarity at a high intelligence. And
Rain, how about you feed mine, Amy? Feed it what? Classic oil! Hold on a minute! Classical composters! And playmaking! A la mode, if you please. Do you fall on your head or something? You actually want to learn things? I want to know it all! I want to climb the mountains of higher learning and...
the boss themes are great as well. Puffy's theme, aka She Has Long Ears track, has an opera singer singing in the background, while the rest of the bosses in this game consist of jazz music. And you know me, I love me some jazz music, especially the sax in some of these boss stages, especially Jackal's theme, aka the Mantle, and Gilwing's theme, aka the Dragon That Screams. Also, the song Dream Dream. Also, the interesting about the game's soundtrack is that every time you replay the level, there's always an instrument added or two. That's due to because Nightopian's mood content in the game. But I'll explain about the Nightopians more on that later. It was rearranged by Takamoko Saga, sung by Curtis Arm Jr., Dana Catriel, and the kid lyrics by Cameron Earl Sutherland and James Ann Allen. Probably the series' most emotional song. It's not my favorite interpretation of Dream Dreams, but it does come pretty close. And speaking of the Nights theme, you'll be hearing remixes of this song throughout the series, especially in the first game, just like Super Mario World. But my absolute favorite track will have to be Peaceful Moment. Acoustic guitar and piano pretty much complements the situation when completing each boss level. When the bosses explode, I like the twinkling effect that kind of reminds me of the heart crystal from Sailor Moon, with the exploding transparency in the background. The song is not only melancholy, but it's somber and evocative, emotional, and it's my second favorite remix engine of the Dreams theme of Night. This theme is pretty much telling kids who have most problem with nightmares is that the worst has passed to come, and that your nightmares have been vanquished of your brain, and you can basically fly off free into any world of the imagined. Because trust me, if I had to look at Gremlins 2 and Nightmare on Elm Street on the NES, I'll probably get nightmares. But hey, I do occasionally listen to this song, especially when I want to go to sleep, and heck, I do end up seeing Nights occasionally when I do. That's the music. Not only that, they added more centaurs whenever you get a high rank in the song Peaceful Moment, which makes the music even more magical, which I like a lot because the soundtrack to this game and the looks, just like Gex 2, has more of a 90s innocent feeling, especially when it comes to your childhood.
So 90s.
Well, as for the PS2 version, I can't really say the music has really changed, but I will say the music is more enhanced and it's more remastered. Wish the songs Dream Dreams will be combined with the kids and adults lyrics, but the PS2 music is pretty much the same in my boat. Music out of the way, let's talk about that gameplay. When you first start the game, you control the two kids on foot after all your idiot has been taken by Wiseman's henchmen and nightmare creatures. But after all, don't think of this game as a 3D platformer. You could explore the dream stages, but you will instantly get kicked out by a floating alarm clock and it will be an instant game over. What you really is supposed to do is touch knights, and the game is really more of a 2.5D on the rails flying game, meaning that the game is in 3D. However though, when flying around the stages, you're locked in a 2D plane. Don't get me wrong, there are some 3D sections, mainly in transformation sections when you transform to a dolphin or a bobsled, and some 3D flying sections in Mystic Forest and in Soft Museum. However, Gabe, you're mostly controlling knights stuck in a 2D plane, but with the 3D polygons and textures and rendering in the background. The controls of knights, it actually controls pretty smoothly. However though, the developers intended for you to use the 3D controller. Yeah, knights is doable for 2D controller, but when, let's say, making sharp turns and paralooping, and especially in those 3D sections, the game developers really wanted you to use their 3D controller, which Sega will take advantage of in their later games. Knights also has two more moves in its arsenal while it's flying. Knights do a paraloop. Basically, if you're having a hard time flying around rings or getting all the blue chips, Knights' paraloop is basically a mini black hole, and every time you turn, you can suck up all the items in your black hole, which counts towards your score. You can also paraloop Mephians and nightmare creatures that will get in the way, and if you manage to get hit by one, you lose 5 seconds of your time. By the way, Mephians are basically Nightopians and Nightmarans fused together, so yeah, they're basically evil Nightopians, and they will occasionally attack knights throughout the stages. Also, similar to Zanaki from Arrow Flash, Knights has a spin dash drill attack. This attack is not really much in use except for attacking enemies, but you could use it to pick up momentum and to speed up the gameplay when flying around slowly. Also, Knights could do tricks. Every time you go into a trick ring, which is basically a yellow and blue ring, you can press the trigger buttons, and depends on your actions while moving around with Knights. Knights could do a couple of tricks to gain even more points. If you thought pulling tricks in the Saturn game is easy, it's even more easier in the PS2 version. There's only one thing I don't like about Knights in the original Sega Saturn version, is that the camera's geared off to the far center left. And seeing Knights flying around the stages can be of a headache inducing sometimes, especially when going so fast. The PS2 fixes that shit by having the game be in widescreen, and seeing how the game runs in 30 FPS, I don't know if it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. Knights' speed has been a little bit reduced, so that way newer players can see where the fuck he's going. So basically, your goal in the game is to basically touch Knights. You basically fly on an on-rails, linear, 2.5D style game, and your job is to basically collect 20 of the blue chips. Then you go into the Idia capture, which is basically the giant tentacle jellyfish blue nightmare creatures, to get the Idia out. Once then, bonus times begin, and instead of flying back to the Idia Palace, which is that giant blue gazebo, you can fly over it, and now blue chips has become gold chips, which doubles the points. Also, knights could fly into these rings. I already talked about the trick rings, the yellow and blue rings. But orange rings are basically 10 points, and yellow rings, which is the double-sided ones, are basically 20 points. So yeah, think of knights like a 3D-ish version of Defender on the Atari 2600. You know, you actually could side-scroll around the screen instead of stated one screen, and it's more 2.5D and on rail. You may be saying, points? Really? Points really do matter? Well, for a game like this, it does matter, because it overall goes into your rank. Your job is to get a C rank or higher to progress within the stage, and an A rank if you really want to see the true ending of this game's story. My only gripe about the original Sega Saturn version is that if you manage to mess up and turn back into the kids, you can't restart the game. Luckily in the PS2 version, they luckily give you the option to restart the game. So, thank God. Because the only way to restart the game in the original Sega Saturn game is to press all the face buttons and triggers, then press start, which will sometimes freeze up the game, and it will crash. Luckily, in the remake, all you just gotta do is press start, hit reset, and bam. And if you still don't know how to play the game, you can always go into the options and click on how to play, which not only has the game's plot synopsis in the summary of it, but you can also see how to play the game as knights. Like I said before, each stage has its own gimmick, so at least flying around the world ain't gonna be too repetitive, especially stages like Spring Valley and Soft Museum, which pretty much looks the same aesthetically, except Soft Museum has statues and Spring Valley has the windmills. But at least Soft Museum's gimmick is that everything is soft and everything can push you back like a trampoline, especially flying in the 3D section. Also, like I said before, there's knights also could transform into various things and various animals. These transformation sequence. These are mostly in 3D, but they are kind of short. Some of them are kind of hard to control, like the dolphin. However, though, the transformation sequences are short and sweet to the point. Also, I forgot to mention the blue chip cages. The blue chip cages basically have instantly 20 blue chips. If you can find these in the stage, which are pretty rare, by the way, you can actually get 20 blue chips. You can have even more infinite bonus time. While the gameplay is good, well, sadly, the bosses are not good. For a first-time gamer, they could not only be confusing, but frustrating. But for me, these bosses are the easiest bosses I have ever encountered in a video game, especially in my first playthrough. Heck, in my first playthrough, I kept on getting A ranks due to how easy these bosses are. The only two bosses that almost gave me a hard time during my first playthrough is Jackal and Claws. What supposed to do with Jackal is paraloop his 3 cards, then after that bounce them across the room before he gets his cape. But my gripe about Jackal is when you do bounce him across the room, the camera becomes sporadic. And in the original version of Nights into Dreams on the Sega Saturn, what you're supposed to do with Claws is either paraloop or drill dash into the exploding mice that he lit up. But due to the popping effect of this game, it's kind of hard to see the sparks on the mice. And not only that, some of these boss orders are pretty much confusing when you first play the game. Because in the Archie Comics, 8 Puffy's supposed to be Claris's first boss, and Gilwing, because Puffy is more of an opera singer, so of course Claris will have nightmares of her music teacher, and Gilwing the dragon will be suitable for Elliot's dream. However, though, if you are playing the original Sega Saturn version, you can actually set up your own boss order. After you beat the game and after you beat all the bosses, just head into the options menu, hit load, then after that you want to hit Nightmarian and then basically turn off random mode, and you can basically pick any boss within the game. Finally, though, in the PS2 version, things are a little different. You can't pick your own bosses, which sucks. However, though, you could pick either the assigned order these bosses have, or put it on random mode like an arcade game. But let's go into spoilers now, because I don't want to hold this video too much.
Spoiler alert.
Sadly though, the final boss is also easy. But before we talk about the final boss, let's talk about my two least favorite stages in the game. Mystic Forest and Stick Canyon. Mystic Forest is alright, but when it comes to its 3D section, especially when you're flying around the overhead, it can be confusing to some gamers and they can get lost and they usually time out. Luckily for me, while playing the game, you could fly around the stage and go through the rings to find your way back. But honestly, it does slow down the pace some. And oh, don't get me started on Stick Canyon. Out of all the stages, who thought it was a good idea to have a abandoned construction site? Again, like I said, even though levels are super linear and there are no multiple paths, at least the game has different gimmicks, but this is my least favorite stage when it comes to different gimmicks. Let's just say getting all the blue chips take too long. Not only that, there are these Marins called Cuddle, and they hold these green rings, and if you fly into them, it depletes your dash meter. But the biggest thing I don't like about this game is that pretty much that crane, that steel crane roller coaster. Actually, when you're flying around the second lap and fourth lap, what the developers want you to do is go through that crane once and then move on to the next act of the stage. Just say it's kind of hard to control, and things pretty much take too long, especially when you're flying around the construction tower of the Twin Seeds. When you beat all that, when you beat Reala, the game just makes up for it. It just gives you an A rank after that frustrating stage. Because believe it or not, beating Reala is so easy. All you gotta do is paraloop Reala 3 times. Heck, these bosses go down easier than what it takes the time to unlock all the characters in Smash Bros. Hell, even the final boss is easy. With Wiseman the Wicked, all you gotta do is just basically dash into him 4 times and that's it. I'm like, come on, you have hands, use them! Compared to most other on-rails games like Star Fox or hell, even Panzer Dragoon, this is pretty much the most easiest game I played in my life. I know Panzer Dragoon is also an on-rails game, but at least then by the 5th level, the game actually gets challenging and it throws everything at you. Getting a higher rank is pretty much challenging because by the 4th level, everything begins to speed up, so at least earning continues there is more worth rewarding. Even in Star Fox is more worth rewarding to the player. Yeah, the game has limited continues and all. It's based on the player's skill and reflexes throughout the game. Knights really doesn't really have a consequence. Even when you're not playing as Knights and exploring around the kid, the closest thing you're gonna get is that floating alarm clock. That's all. Heck, the sequel's more challenging. Even when you're playing as Knights and you time out, you get game over. So yeah, that's pretty much my gripe. Also, I want to take the time to talk about an uncut boss called I Know Myself. You can actually listen to this song in the OST version of Night. Basically, I Know Myself was going to be a boss in the game, and it was going to represent Knights' true nightmare and evil side. But seeing how in the regular Nights into Dreams game, in Reala's boss fight, where Reala could just copy all your moveset, there's really no such thing as I Know Myself. And it's a darn shame this boss wasn't in the PS2 remake. And it would have make up for all the easy bosses you went through, and it would have been a new set of challenge that you had to face within a time limit. When it comes to this game, it's just way too friggin' easy. Some newer players could say that it's frustrating, but to me, this has to be the most easiest on-rails games I have played. Near the end of the game, Elliot and Clarice try to rescue Knights, but to be to be pushed away by Wiseman's force field. However, with the Idia of Courage, they actually have one-time power to fly, and basically you just go do one lap and collect all the 20 blue chips that hit the Idia capture. Kids also fly through the Twin Seats Tower, which is basically based off Japan's famous radio tower in Tokyo. After dashing the Wiseman for the fourth and final time, Knights actually sacrifices his or hers to make sure the kids enjoy their everyday life and combat their fears and their high anxiety problems in their own lives. Luckily to the developers, Knights is an immoral dream jester, so even though Knights could die in your dreams, at least Knights could in somebody else's dreams. And the game just rolls the credits. In the PS2 version, when the credits begin to roll, the game gives you a little text message on thanking the players to the original game and the developers, while the Sega Saturn version basically just shows the game's logo. But wait, we are not done yet. It's the moment you have been waiting for, the Christmas bonus feature. Seeing how Knights of Dreams pretty much was the mega hit title on the Sega Saturn, it was Sonic's team's genius idea to bundle the original Knights with the Sega Saturn by releasing a demo for it. What we got is Christmas Knights, only if you live in Japan. If you live in the United States, however, you had to get this game drew off of various Sega Saturn magazines or the last few issues of Sega Visions back in the mid-90s. I don't know why they picked Knights to be out of anything to have a Christmas-related game. Honestly, they could have picked any holiday. But seeing how the holidays is an innocent time to have pretty much dreams to your wild imaginations, especially Sugar Plum's fairies in your head, and seeing how Knights could shape any dreamer's lives due to high anxiety problems, like how Santa and Rudolph could shape any kids and all around the world with happiness and joy throughout the holidays, I can see this making sense to the developers. Also, Christmas Nights also has other holiday features too, such as New Year's and Valentine's Day, aka dubbed Winter Nights, which you can only access during the late part of November or the early part of January and February. But there's really nothing to say about these two other holiday features, except for the fact that you'll be playing as regular Knights. When you play the game any other time of the year, it's just the regular demo. However, if you do play this game on April Fool's Day, you get to play as Reala as well. Also, in the remake, if you set the game on random mode for the bosses, there's also an exclusive boss fight where you face off against Knights instead of Reala, with an exclusive track in the game. Believe it or not, Christmas Nights is actually the continuation of the regular game, and the story is actually pretty simple. Elliot and Clarice is walking around the city during Christmas time, and they wonder why all the citizens are rushing home and not being amazed by the Christmas decorations and reflecting on the most joyous times of year. Notice that the Twin Seas Tower, which is all decked up like a Christmas tree, does not have a star on top, so they pretty much have to summon you-know-who to go get the star back. I kind of like this story. It's pretty much simple for a Christmas story, but not being too dark or too sappy than most Christmas stories are about. But still at the end having a moral together on basically, you should basically stop your everyday lives, and at least the times you got with your family and friends, especially on Christmas time. Also, fun fact, the designer of Knights, Nato Oshima, also did the illustrations for the game's intro and outro and ending cutscenes, which you may know him as the designer of Sonic the Hedgehog and the designer of the original Knights. But with the story, this whole Christmas Night story was narrated by Lisa Hart, who did the original narration in the original Sega Saturn game, Wow. The PS2 remake was narrated by Francis M. Benitez. Yes, the same voice actor who does Helen's mom in Journey of Dreams. By the way, let's go on to the gameplay. Well, there's really nothing to say about the aesthetics of this game, so I'm not going to go into more depth in detail. All you need to know is that the name of the game is pretty much the same, except, you know, Elliot can travel around this Claris Spring Valley both his own unique route. Everything has been changed though. Like, for example, Reeves are now rings. I meant to say rings are now Reeves, chips are now rainbow chips, the Christmas ornaments, the Idiot Capture are now mini Christmas trees, and also the Idiot Palace is represented to be a birthday cake. How you deposit your Idia onto the birthday cake is more of a candle flame. Maybe to celebrate Jesus' birthday after all. Ours are pretty much the same, but the blue chip boxes are now presents. And just like Christmas, when you break open them once, they never return. But just like a Christmas present, you can only open your presents every once a year. Trick rings pretty much get rid of the Knights jingle, seeing how Christmas game art has its own theme, which is basically just jingle bells. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. Let's sing along. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride on my horse and sleigh. Hey!
Jingle bells, Batman smelled, Robin laid an egg. The Batmobile lost the wheel, and the Joker got away.
When did you ever come in my video?
You never see it coming. You say that my mind is too fast for a ride.
Not Sega's Joker. I'm talking about DC's Joker.
Yeah, Jingle Bells is the only song that you're gonna get. I wish this game had more Christmas songs like Angels on Wings and One Horse Ride on a Sleigh. I wish this game had other holiday features such as Kwanzaa and Hanukkah nights. But if you come to think about it, there's not really a lot of video games that center around Christmas. Yeah, sure, there are a couple of game events, just like Shenmue and Snatcher, where they have set a period on time Christmas, but that's due to the game's story. There are a couple of games that actually have a title screen that has a Christmas representation, but it doesn't have a full-on Christmas level. The closest that I could think of is pretty much the Christmas rendition of Toy Commander, which came out in 2001 on the Sega Dreamcast Magazine Volume 10, Home Alone, and no, not the Nintendos, not the NES games Home Alone, I'm talking about the Sega Home Alones on the Sega Genesis. And there's also Christmas Seaman, but who wants to play that?
I'm gonna call in to be in my video. Sorry, but that's kind of too late. The angry video game nerd beat me to it. But I can do this.
After the basic gameplay of collecting all 4 Idias, you end up fighting a Christmas render version of Gilwing, which he's pretty much red and green compared to the blue and green. Plus the rose bush in the background is changed to a Christmas tree, but with more spikes. An epic version of Silent Night remix plays in Gilwing's boss battle, which is basically a combination of his theme, and it's called The Dragon That Screams in the Holy Night. Bash Gilwing's head or paraloop his tail once, and you basically get one of the stars. Beat the game again with one of the kids, it reveals the full-on Christmas tree. After the game, kids think that they got the star, but it turns out to be a dream. However, due to some embarrassment on one of the kids tripping on the ice, since the Twin Seas stop to help Elliot, and they also got around the Christmas tree, and the game pretty much gives you a little message on saying Merry Christmas. Roll the credits, and what I like to say about these credits is that the acapella version of Dreams is pretty much my absolute favorite adaptation of Dreams. Not only it has the original emotional charm to Dreams, but it's somber, melancholy, and very heartwarming and emotional. Hearing this song always gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling in my stomach. What the greatest thing is about this song too is that singer Marlon Sanders helped out on this song. He will later do the opening to the Burning Rangers theme song and helped out on Knuckles' theme song in Sonic Adventure. Even though the regular Christmas mode is done, we still got tons of features in this game. There's Link Attack and Time Attack, which is basically the two physical awards. You either play as Knights or Reala. You can see you can get the best timer Link in the game. But seeing how the main game is already a score attack, I don't pretty much mess with this mode all the time. There's Karaoke mode, which you can pretty much sing the main theme song of the game. You can watch the E3 summer trailers of Nights of the Dreams, which came out in '96. And then there's also the Knights Museum, which basically shows all the concept art, character designs throughout the game. There's the Knights Goods, which basically shows merchandising of Nights of the Dreams merch. Who knows, Knights would have been bigger than Sonic, or heck, even Mario during that time. There's also the Melody Box, which you could change and rearrange the songs, which is based off the mood content, based off the Nightopians. You can also play this in the regular stages as well, but mainly only in Spring Valley, of course, and it's only accessible on Christmas night. Then there's the Nightopian collection, which you could basically check up on your Nightopians throughout the game. The Nightopians are basically the predecessor to basically the Chows in Sonic Adventure. The more Nightopian eggs you hatch, the better the song gets throughout the game. The more Nightopians you change into Mephians or Paraloop, the song has a drastic different remix throughout the game. My only gripe when checking Nightopians is that you check a single one of Nightopians, the game likes to freeze up on occasion. And let's just say, when moving to another screen to check on the next set of Nightopians, the next set of levels, it pretty much repeats, which could pretty much break up the pace and almost ruin the game for you in the original version of Christmas Nights. The biggest feature in Christmas Nights is that one little icon in the corner, because it's not Knights, Reala, or one of the main avatar characters in the game. It turns out to be Sonic the Hedgehog. Yes, you heard me that right. You get to play as Sonic the Hedgehog in his first ever 3D debut. Sonic 3D Blast does not count. Basically, Sonic pretty much controls like the kids, but he's a little bit more faster. However, though, when you're playing as Sonic, the acceleration can be off, and strangely enough, Sonic can jump pretty high. The name of the game is pretty much the same, but this is not really designed for Sonic. It's really designed for Knights. When it comes to getting all the chicks throughout the stages, yeah, let's just say the platforming can be a bit awkward. Try to be like Mario, at least try to give us the Spin Dash Sonic team. Draw out honesty, this is pretty much Sonic's team saying that even though Sonic Extreme might be cancelled, you do not want to lose your promise on basically playing Sonic on the Sega Saturn, because the original Sonic Extreme was pretty much a nightmare to control. And hey, this Sonic preview demo is way much more better than what Yu Suzuki was doing to Shenmue. He was trying to develop it for the Sega Saturn. At least Sonic Team was graceful enough to let us play as a 3D version of Sonic on the Sega Saturn. And it was in a Christmas demo out of all the things. In a Knights game to perhaps. You collect all the 4 Idias. Wait a minute, that's not Puffy. It's basically Dr. Robotnik.
You could at least not overdo it with the turkey and eat it all.
But all honestly, I love this boss fight. The song that they're playing is basically final boss theme from Sonic CD, seeing how Nafumi did Sonic CD. And plus, this is the only area where you can stretch out Sonic's moves and actually has a little bit of platforming involved. After you bash Eggman into a couple of times, you pretty much win the whole minigame, and this is where Christmas Nights end.
You really, wow. You had to get Sonic the Hedgehog to save Christmas. It could have been Knights, Everyone's favorite courtroom jester, but no, it had to be Sonic.
To unlock these features, you gotta play this card matching mini game every time you defeat Gilwing with a high enough rank. My only gripe is that you only get a couple of chances throughout this mini game, and you have to basically beat Gilwing over again, which can sound repetitive. With all those awesome features in the Sega Saturn original, do you expect to have something in the PS2 remake? Well, no. In the PS2 remake, they still have the Christmas Nights feature, gameplay and all, and you actually get title screen from the game during the Advent period in the game. The graphics are a little bit better than the one on the Sega Saturn original. However, though, I sort of do miss the neon blue sky. It just richens up the atmosphere, especially around Christmas time. The purple sky in Remake can be jarring at some times. And Gilwing's designs, they still haven't changed it. He has, his new design still has that Peter Griffin type chin. Not only that, it's the pinkish transparency and lighting effects that was around his room during Christmas rendition of this game. But at least luckily, when you beat Gilwing once, you do not have to beat him again, and you can also skip both the cutscene and the credits. So the extras are a little bit unbaked to begin with. Still have Reala into Dreams, whatnot. However, you only get a gallery in the game, and pretty much it has the same pictures like in the original Nights. However, though, it does show up more merchandising, and there's even a Christmas merch with not only Knights, but with Virtual Fighter, Last Bronx, and Fighting Viper characters. There's also a movie gallery, which not only you can view the cutscenes in the game, but you can actually see an interview from Atashi Iizuka himself and how he developed Knights. Also, the Nightopian collection has been improved. Now you can check up your Nightopians without no interruptions, so you don't have to worry about the game freezing up on you. And 2, music doesn't stutter when going to a new screen. There's also a sound test that you can unlock in the game, but it's pretty much half-assed. It has every song in the game. However, though, it's missing 1 or 2 songs, like for example, Peaceful Moment, which is basically the results music every time you defeat a Nightmare boss. Not only that, I find it kind of odd that the game has After the Dream, but it's not in the remake of playing the remake of PS2 version of Nights into Dreams when you're flying around regular levels, especially during leaderboards. It only plays meshes of Nightopia. However, though, with all these new changes in mind, it's kind of eyebrow raisings that half of the features were just gone. There's no link attack, there's no time attack, and the most crucial of all, there is no Sonic into Dreams. I know Sega didn't want to redesign classic Sonic to make him run around the HD version of the remake, but they could at least put in modern Sonic. Would have been a good compromise in the game, but oh well, winners cannot be choosers. But yeah, that's pretty much the Christmas rendition of Nights into Dreams. So, remake or rebreak, how well does this game holds up and improves upon on its original? Well, this was pretty tough to me because I was going to give the game more of a remaster score. The graphics are way much more improvement, and even though the game runs at 30 FPS, there is no pop-in effect, and plus the JPEG image in the background has been fixed to have the appropriate set of skyboxes. However, though, there's somewhat of a downgrade seeing how this game has even more dithering than before, and even though some of the character models have been improved, some have been not. I'm glad this game has a tutorial section where you can read the plot synopsis and figure out the gameplay, but I wish there was more story cutscenes so you could understand the story along with the game. I will say the music is way more enhanced, switching from a stereo sounding game to a double surround sounding game. And if you still don't like the way the remake has been changed, you can always play the game in the Sega Saturn mode. However, though, there are some things that were lost in translation, such as the transparency effect and more. But the biggest downfall to me is the Christmas Nights edition. Yeah, sure, you don't have to buy a separate disc for this game, and it has the Christmas bonus stuff inside the game. However, though, it's only one level, and it only has one extra holiday feature, compared to the original Sega Saturn game, which has a buttload of features and a playable Sonic to boot. So I have to give this game a remake score. It fixes all the problems that the original has and polish it for an enhanced experience. The only reason why I can't give this game a replace or a remaster, because there are more things that remake could have took advantage of or made some compromises. Well, not only that, it could have been a good opportunity to put the cut boss fight I know myself in the game to at least make the game bosses even more challenging. However, though, that was a missed opportunity to the developers of this remake. And this remake is pretty much like the Klonoa remake on Wii, meaning that, yeah, sure, the remake's okay, but there was a lot of missed opportunities that the original did better. I will only recommend the remake to fans who never experienced Nights into Dreams and can't afford the original Sega Saturn console. You're better off just buying this game off of EasyIt.com, well, the bootlegs, because let's face it, the original game is going up the high price on eBay. And I would recommend you buy a regular Sega Saturn console with Sega Saturn Boop Unlocker cartridge to get the most authentic experience in this game. Not saying the remake is bad, but the original just did so much better than the remake. So how about Nights into Dreams as a whole? Well, it's Sonic's team's most unique experiment that I have ever played in my life. Compared to most games where it takes place in the dream world, at least the lore is understandable and there's no hint of voice acting in the cutscenes. Yeah, sure, the CGI is a little bit outdated, but at least compared to most games that take place in the dream, it's not overly surreal and it makes somewhat sense and it doesn't slap you in the face towards the end. Flying gameplay is different compared to most on-rails games I have played, and it was a unique experience playing as a flying character instead of a dragon or jet, where you fly through rings, which is way better than Superman 64 will ever be. However, though, the game is just too easy, including the bosses. Heck, the first two Panzer Dragoon games were a hell of a lot shorter, yeah, but at least near the end of the game, there was some challenge involved, especially with the bosses. The bosses in Nights into Dreams are just way too easy in my book, and for the first time player, confusing and frustrating. As for Christmas Nights, yeah, sure, I wish there was a little bit more holiday features in the game, but at least the features we do got somewhat passable in my book. That's why I would recommend playing this game during December. Due to the game's short, easy length and easy bosses, at least the Christmas feature will hold you over throughout the holiday season. You may be wondering to yourself, will Sonic Team and Sega ever make new IPs or go back to Night again? Well, keeping with Sega's track record and Sonic Team, I have doubts that's gonna come by anytime soon. Especially with Atashi Iizuka taking more blowjobs and the employees scoring more cocaine than they could ever do up their noses. And besides, I think the other Sega franchises need more attention than Nights will ever have been. Even though Nights is forgotten, Nights ain't totally forgotten. If Sonic Team and Sega ever wants to bring back the Nights gameplay again, instead of making an on-the-rails 2.5D game, they should make the game fully 3D, based off the Sega Superstar minigame, and maybe make the bosses more challenging and interesting.
Enjoy the review. This review came out a little late, but if it is, so what? I just wanted to do this game for a while, and yeah, I wanted to do something different this year for Christmas. Well, if you're watching this review after Kwanzaa, I'd like to say Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, and of course,
Merry Christmas.
can't see your face. You're that special one that I've been waiting for, and I hope you're looking for someone like me. In my dreams, I can hear you calling me in the night. Everything is so sweet in your eyes. I feel there's so much inside. Oh yeah. In the night, June delight, I want to see you stand